Welcome to episode 26 of the Thelma Tapes, the Living Memory Association podcast. This edition is dedicated to first cars and family car trips from the mists of time, featuring tales of learning to drive in a bright yellow Cortina, early Skodas that didn't like hills, resurrecting written-off cars from the scrapyard, rusty minis that allowed your feet to touch the road, and balancing on the middle armrest with a great view but not a seatbelt in sight. Back in time we go.
What actually was your first car?
Yes, I had a yellow Mini, which I called my Fred Flintstone car because it had no floor in it. Then Minis were the worst. If it wasn't the floor, the back end would fall off.
That's right, yeah.
With the rust.
The subframe usually rotted
right.
away.
My dad had a little car. It was a Ford Austin 5, I think. Little matchbox-shaped car, and he called it his wee Lizzie. And then following that, he had a large Rover 10, and he called that his Big Bertha. And I remember we went from Cooper to Edinburgh to visit the zoo when I was still up at primary school, and it broke down on the way, and there were little smoke coming out of the engine, and we did eventually reach Edinburgh. I think maybe somebody towed us the last bit, but it was late in the afternoon and the penguins had paraded and all the animals gone to sleep.
Oh,
I suppose the first car that we ever had as a family was a Ford Prefect. I remember, and I think the door actually opened front-wise. It was that old. So yeah, I remember that, and I remember going to, I was just a baby, but my mother used to tell us a story about when my father took her to Croy Shore in Ayrshire. It seemed like there's a hill there, and it was getting up the hill. It was all right going down the hill, but it was when we left the seashore and going back up the hill, it seemed like my father managed to stall the thing on the hill and couldn't get it going again. So she just always remembered that as an embarrassing time, as umpteen other drivers were waiting on him, stuck on the hill behind him as he tried to get up. But I was too wee, but I always remember my mother would bring that up occasionally.
And was it your dad that always drove?
Yes, because the Mini was my mum's car.
Oh, right, okay.
Morris's, I mean, they were the standard 60s cars,
Yeah,
but she
yeah.
had the small one. She wasn't very good. She hated reversing. She could only drive forward. She used to get flummoxed if she had to reverse. But my dad, as a GP, had this black, serious car.
Actually, it was unusual that your mates didn't have cars.
No, I was the only one that had a licence because the company that I worked for had a job as what they called a second man, which was on the trucks with the driver, deliveries, and they just came along one day when I was 17 and asked me if I wanted to learn to drive, and I said, well, I can't really afford this. He said, oh no, we'll pay for everything. Right. So they sent me to driving school. Then I got a job with them, and then I thought, no, this isn't for me. I've got my licence now. I can do what I want. So I left.
We've got, in here in Britain, we had a classic advert from that, I think it probably was the 90s into the early 2000s. I'm going to play you that because you won't have heard this before. This is Papa and Nicole from the Clio advert here. Let's listen.
You may be looking for a car that's small and practical. But you still want a car that feels luxurious. Well, now you've found it, because while the Clio is certainly small, it's perfectly formed.
Nicole?
Papa?
The new Renault Clio.
You won't have seen that before, wouldn't you?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. It was the exact same car, I think. Same color, same model.
No, really. So your first car, as we've ascertained, was a Renault Clio, and that was, I think, a lot of people remember that advert because it went on and on. There was a whole kind of series about Papa and Nicole. That's the only thing they ever said to each other. So your first car, how did you get it?
It was a car in the family. It was my cousin's car, and he got rid of them, so I had to have it.
So it was passed on.
Yeah, and it was a cool car because there was a CD player in it.
God, that's a height of sophistication.
Yeah.
So what sort of music were you playing?
I think a lot of rock, what I was listening at that time.
Right, okay. French?
No, No.
That's quite an emphatic no.
I was always into more English-speaking music, so
Okay.
it was American rock.
How long did you have this car?
For a few years, maybe 7, 8 years.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
And you were saying all cars in French are she.
Yeah, it's feminine, so it's a
Right.
she.
Then after our first child was born, we got a Volkswagen Beetle. And we found out very much a friendly car in that if you were driving along, coming the other way, you passed somebody in a Volkswagen Beetle, they always gave you a little wave, a raised finger, just recognition of being the same car owner.
And what era would that be then that you had the Beetle?
1964. We had that for a few years. It was very reliable. And of course the engine was at the back and you put your luggage in the front. That was the style of the Beetle.
So your second car was also a Mini.
That was a minivan. Very useful for courting, shall we say.
Yes, I was going to say, I thought you meant for carrying, cargo and luggage around.
No,
but
not really, no. Well,
No.
if you want to call ladies cargo and luggage, that's up to you, Miles.
And where did you get these cars from?
Well, my uncle's friend had a scrapyard down in Bangor Road, and I just went down there and he would sell me a banger for 20 quid.
So this is stuff that had actually been condemned to...
Yes, but he managed to get them up and running.
Did you get an MOT with this? or-
Well, probably not. I don't think you got anything. You were lucky if it went. But even if it lasted you for a month, it's 20
Yeah.
quid worth of transport.
Yeah.
You know.
And I mean, petrol. I think petrol was
Petrol
cheap.
was quite cheap then.
Did you insure it then? Or?
Well, I'm not going to go there. Just in case there's any of my insurance companies at the moment listening.
We just have John has completely changed his life now. He's
I now have insurance for my car.
yes, yeah. They were all... And did you go far in your car?
Mainly round Edinburgh. I had a girlfriend at South Queensferry, and I used to pray every time I went over the bridge that the car would make it and back, and it did. Except for one night it broke down and I just abandoned it in Barnton Road. I phoned my uncle's pal the next day, and he came along, towed it back to the scrapyard, and he gave me a tenner.
You did all right with your cars, didn't you?
Yeah.
So do you remember any other models you had?
Well, I had a Polonaise, which was Polish. I've had a Lada, of course, Russian. I've had a Fiat, Italian. So yeah, had quite a few. I had a Singer Gazelle, a Hillman Minx, all these things.
All
But
right.
the Singer Gazelles and the Hillman Minx and the Cortina all came from my uncle's friend's scrapyard.
I think the first one I drove after I passed my test, because I remember the third child putting him in his caddy cot in the back of it, and it was a Countryman, with the wooden panelling, and that was, you could open up the door at the back, put the caddy cot in.
I mean, I can remember there used to be builders next door when I was a lad, and he had, I think it was a Vauxhall Cresta or one of these cars, which was a kind of American style.
I can
thing.
tell you a story about that. When I
Yeah.
first passed my test in the 60s, I didn't have a car, and my father was friendly. We worked with somebody in the docks, and he said to my father, I've got a car lying down there in the docks. It's a Vauxhall Wyvern, which is
Oh,
what
yeah.
we're talking about.
Yeah.
They called it the bull-nosed Vauxhall. Well, I went down to the docks, spent 2 days, and I couldn't find this car. So I never got it. And that's a true story.
Well, I remember this guy because it rusted, it rotted away. Big holes in the
That's
wing.
right, they were pretty bad for
Oh,
that.
yeah. So he used to fill it with concrete, which is, I suppose, wouldn't rust.
Make it a bit heavy, but...
Well, the very first wheeled transport I remember us having was my dad's motorbike and sidecar. I was very young at the time, less than 8 years old, because it was when we lived in Achtermachty. And my dad used to drive it, obviously, with my older brother sitting behind him, and my mum and I in the sidecar. And they say that that's a very safe vehicle because it's well balanced.
The next car that we got was my uncle was living with us, and he had a Hillman Super Minx,
Well, that's a bit more
and
upmarket.
that was a heavy big car. Right? It was a two-tone one. It was a light blue body and a white or cream roof, and it looked good.
Yeah.
I remember, I think it was a good looking car, the Hillman Super Minx, and it had the front seat was all one, like a bench.
Oh,
seat,
yeah, yeah.
and the upholstery was light blue.
And no seatbelts.
Oh no, it's no seat belts.
No.
I remember, no, and no brake in the seat. So it's just
No.
the bench seat at the front.
Yeah, of
which was
course,
quite
yeah.
weird. That also.
So that was the brake come out the dashboard, I think, didn't it, in that circumstances?
Yeah, it must have, I suppose. Yeah, I don't know.
And
Yeah,
did it break down or?
It was a good one. No, no, he liked it. We all liked the Hillman Super Minx.
Yeah.
I sat my first test when I was 17. It was very much the fashion when you were in 6th year that you took driving lessons and sat your test. So I couldn't afford very many driving lessons because I had a Saturday job in Woolworths, and for the whole day on Saturday I earned 16 shillings, minus your stamp was 15 and 9 pence, and it cost 15 shillings for a driving lesson. So even if I had one a week, I had no money for the rest of the week. So I wanted desperately to pass the test before I was 18, so I'd only had not very many lessons and booked a test. And my birthday was in July, but they couldn't give me a test in Cooper where I was familiar with the streets and had practiced with the instructor. They could only give me one in St Andrews. And St Andrews in July was really busy with tourists and families trickling across the road with buckets and spades, and I didn't know the streets very well, so I failed that test. But fair enough, I obviously wasn't ready. And then I didn't sit again until I was 25.
Oh, goodness.
And by then I was more motivated because I was married with 2 children and the third one on the way. So I really wanted to learn to drive, and I passed at that time.
And then after that, he'd go a Ford Cortina, but it was a 1300. And I think he got another engine and put it in it. I remember him working away on it because he was an engineer.
Ah, yeah, of course.
And he zipped it up.
Right.
And it was yellow, bright yellow. So that must have been the one that I learned to drive in.
And what was your first car?
My first car was the Nissan Micra.
Oh, right, so you quite late on.
Yeah, I was never that keen on car. I mean, I just drove because it was a handy thing to do, but I never seen it as a sort of prestige thing or something to show off in or anything like that. So and then living in Edinburgh, a lot of the times you don't need a car with the buses.
Yeah.
So I never got one until 18 years ago or something. We got the Nissan Micra.
Yeah, that's the advantage of a city, because I lived in the middle of the countryside, so it was just like we were talking to John Thompson there about, my first car was a Morris 1000, which was 25 years old when I got it, and my dad did it up because he was a mechanic, but that was a great car, and we drove all over the place and drove to pubs, had a drink.
Yeah, that's what we did. Yeah, but the other car that my uncle got after the Ford Cortina was the Skoda.
Oh, yes.
One of the early Skodas that had the engine in the boot.
Yeah,
and that was a good wee car.
Yeah, although they were much derided.
Yeah, they were.
At the time.
Yeah, but again, it got you. But it didn't like hills.
Oh, right.
It struggled going up a steep hill. Mind of that. But no, apart from that, it did him fine.
Yeah.
It did me, because I used to borrow it for him. So I suppose I did have access to a car rather than just having my own, so I could borrow his when I needed it.
So even though you weren't interested in cars, you did get your driving test, obviously.
I passed when I was 18, because he'd given us lessons, and then I got a couple of lessons for an instructor. I always remember the first lesson that I got for the instructor, and he says, or I must have said, I've got my test next month, and he says, really? So, what after that? And it was because I'd went in his car, and I wasn't used to it. Yeah. And then so the next lesson I had, I says, use my uncle's car, and he said, aye. So we got into my uncle's car, and I was far better in it because I kent it, and whereas his had dual controls, so he was monkeying about while I was, and I had no idea what was going on there.
I remember buying a Mini and hadn't looked at it properly under the carpets, and there was a rotten, not crack, but it was this long strip that would rotten in the floor. And actually, when I drove it for a few months, when you accelerated, the gap got wider, and when you braked, it got smaller. Yeah. I didn't keep it too long, but that was a continual round of.
You've got this image later on, just putting your feet down and keeping it running with it.
It was almost
through the floorboards.
Yeah.
It was a Riley. It was black. Yeah. It was kind of the I don't want to give my age away, of course, the early 60s. And Sunday runs out after church was the thing you did. And we lived in Kincardine, which is just over the Forth, and we used to go to a place called Pow Mill Milk Bar, going north towards Crieff.
Yeah.
It was the early days of farms, and you would get milkshakes. That's what I loved about it. It was a strawberry milkshake. But, they did snacks, sandwiches and things. And we used to sit in this car, and I've got a little prop here.
Can
Would
you
care to
describe it?
describe it, Miles?
Well, it's like a very small tea tray, so it's red plastic with the little kind of handle bits at the side. But it has an intriguing mechanism at the bottom, doesn't it? Which is spring-loaded.
Spring-loaded. Don't get your fingers caught here.
No. So what was that for then, Jim?
Well, it was called a car tray, and with these two sort of spring-loaded, very violent arms, you wound down your window, not an electric window. You had the thing that you actually rotated down, and you placed this over the window. I suppose it went over the door if the window was down, and that provided you with a little surface for your wee bit of your milkshake, your sandwich, which came in paper cups, I remember, with little handles that folded round. You held the handles like it became a cup, a proper cup of a handle. And that was a Sunday run. The thing I also remember was the back seat had an armrest that you could pull down. I loved to sit in this armrest between my two brothers.
You don't have to do the same sort of maintenance. I mean, my uncle used to maintain, with checking the oil and the water and the braking and everything. And I've never checked anything on a car. Well, I wouldn't have known how. You see, he did it all. Yeah. But instead of me being interested, I was just interested in getting places. I wasn't interested in maintaining the car or learning anything useful.
But one day I was driving to Juniper Green School, where I was a teacher, and it was before 8 o'clock in the morning, about 10 to 8, and I could see traffic piling up ahead of me, obviously backing up from a traffic light that had gone red. And so I braked, but the car behind me didn't. And she barged into the back of me and sent me into the back of the one in front. And I was fairly close because we were coming to a halt, Yeah. And my car was so concertina that, first of all, I couldn't open the door to get out because the driver of the car behind said, "Could you step out of your car?" I said, "No, I can't." I had to climb over the gear stick and go out the passenger door. He wrenched that open for me. And the car was a write-off, in fact, because it was so badly concertina. I had a bit of whiplash, had to wear a neck collar for a few days. Got a lot of sympathy. That particular car, its registration was KEV. And the school children in my class, they knew it was my car, and they liked the fact its name was Kev.
Yeah, I had a wee collection of toy cars. It was the Corgi and Dinky wee models that they produced, and also some Matchbox ones, I remember. But I suppose my favourite one was I had a gold Aston Martin that was a James Bond one.
Wow.
And it had the wee men inside it. So a James Bond in the driver's seat, and then it had a passenger, and it had the ejector seat. So when you pressed the wee button at the side in the car, the roof would open and the wee seat would come up and the man would fly out. The passenger would fly off. So and that was based on one of the Bond films that had happened in. And would it be Goldfinger?
Probably was.
Probably, because the car was
gold
as well. Yeah. And it had the bulletproof thing at the back that shot up
yeah,
shield.
That's right, yeah.
And it had wee machine guns that popped out the front bumpers.
It's surprising you said you had no interest in cars. You've just described that with such love and tenderness.
Yeah. No, as a kid, playing with that was great. And you always knew that James Bond had the Aston Martin and Roger Moore had the Volvo as the Saint.
Right,
I think I had the Saint's car too. I had the Volvo. Yeah, I had a stack of different cars. I had a Batmobile one.
Yeah, remember that.
Was a popular one. And for some reason, I had a Green Hornet one.
Yeah, I had the Green Hornet.
You had the Green Hornet. I had a thing in the top that...
that's right, that whizzed out the back.
It whizzed up,
yeah,
that was weird. Yeah, I didn't even ken who the Green Hornet was, I don't think.
No, I've no idea. I don't
it's just
the
car looked quite strange and sort of wacky. And a collection of cars like that passed the time. I had them in a wee suitcase. Kept them in my wee suitcase.
So we've heard it here first that your first car was an Aston Martin.
Aston Martin, gold Aston Martin.
Thank you so much to Evelyn, Joyce, Miles, Delphine and the two Johns for their four-wheel memories. If you have a story to share, please pop in to see us at the Little Shop of Memory on the second floor of Ocean Terminal, Leith. You can also visit our Facebook page to keep up with our regular events and view our wonderful photo videos on our YouTube channel just by searching for the Living Memory Association. We also have a brilliant website at www.livingmemory.org.uk hosting 3,000 photos of the past in association with Edinburgh Collected. Through the webpage, if you click on the Projects tab, you can also access Thelma FM, our brand new radio station playing records and reminiscence 24 hours a day. Until next time, we bid you farewell.